So keeping that in mind for this ulna, we have radial notch, telling us this is the lateral side. We have the trochlear notch and the coronoid process sticking out to the anterior, facing anteriorly now. So we know we have our right ulna bone. This is a cool picture just showing you how the antebrachial bones connect or articulate to the humerus. And so you can see the ulna, the trochlear notch, is just going to be taken up by the trochlea. It's going to surround it and allow it to pivot back and forth. And the radius, the head of the radius, is going to sit on the capitulum. Looking at the posterior view of this, we can see how the olecranon, or the tip of the elbow, is going to actually sit in that olecranon fossa of the humerus. Now, working on the radius, we're going to have the head, which we just saw, which articulates with the capitulum and sits in that radial notch of the ulna. The neck is just going to be the portion of the bone connecting the head to the rest of the bone. We're going to have something called the radial tuberosity, which is going to be, if you recall, a tuberosity is a rough projection on a bone. We'll also have a styloid process on the radius, which is just called the styloid process of the radius, lateral styloid process, or radial styloid process. And then on the same aspect of the bone distally, we're also going to have an ulnar notch, will be an indention on the medial side of the radius where the ulna bone is actually going to sit in. So taking a look at that same picture, this time we're going to focus on the radius. We can see the head right here sitting in the radial notch. The neck connects the head to the rest. And then we also have our radial tuberosity right here. And so we'll discuss this more when we get to the muscle section, but the biceps brachii muscles will actually insert onto the radial tuberosity. And so this structure has to be more anterior on the bone. So that will also help you figure out right from left. As we continue down distally, we get down here to the distal end, we'll see another point right here, which is going to be that radial styloid process. And then on this aspect, there's an indention in the radius just called the ulnar notch, and that's where we see the ulna sitting in. Moving on to the carpal bones, these can be broken down into two different rows, a proximal row and a distal row. Now, we're just going to go through the names of them real quick. So proximal row, we have scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum or triquetral bone, pisiform, and then in our distal row, we have trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. Now, hamate's going to be one we'll come back to, but you want to put a star in your notes for hamate as it has a specific feature on it called the hook of hamate, and it's really easy to see. So it's a good landmark to help you figure out kind of where you're sitting at. Now, everybody's going to have their own saying or mnemonic for the carpal bones. So I'll give you the one that I use, and then if you need to Google different ones or if another instructor has a better one, just go with whatever works for you. But the mnemonic that I know of for this is students like to party, and that indicates this is all the proximal row, whereas the distal row is going to be then they crawl home. So if you can figure out the names of all of these and you work through your saying, whichever saying you want to use, it's going to help you figure out what you're looking at. So as we move on, here's a picture of the carpal bones. We're just going to divide this into the rows. So this is about right where we're going to see this division between all of them. Now, it's not perfect in reality, but it's close enough. Just like so. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is the distal row here. Every single one of the distal row carpal bones is going to touch a metacarpal versus the proximal row. None of them will touch a metacarpal.